Welcome to Pastor with Dave Stone. I am honored to be your host, and I know that you're going to enjoy our guest that we have today. This is a brand new podcast, and perhaps you have checked out the preview episode that we put on just to kind of acquaint you with what some of our goals are. But I do want you to know that from my heart as a pastor, we want this to be an encouraging podcast that lifts your spirits, that inspires you, that encourages you when you feel like you're running on empty and you're going through a difficult time. We want to give you weekly a podcast that will minister to your needs. So I hope you enjoy it. I know you're going to enjoy today. Let me tell you about our special guest. His name is Ted Cunningham. Many of you have probably heard him speak in countless settings. He is a man who's known for his brand of humor. He's the founding and lead pastor of Woodland Hills Family Church in Branson, Missouri. He's been there for over 20 years. He and his wife, Amy, have two kids, Corinne and Carson. Amy and Ted have been married for 28 years, and he is one of the most interesting, dynamic, hilarious guys that you will ever meet. He's a comedian on the Date Night Comedy Tour. If you've watched many of the podcasts and broadcasts from Focus on the Family, no doubt you have seen Ted Cunningham, and he has become one of your favorites. Ted's already authored 10 books, but more than the written word, more than the preached word that he shares with his congregation, I appreciate his heart, and he's become a good friend, and we're honored to have him as our first guest. Hey, I want to jump right in, and what I've noticed about you and observed is that you don't take yourself too seriously. I like watching when you're speaking. I like to watch Amy. Oh. I like to watch how she's responding, and lots of times our wives have heard things that we've said a multiplicity of times.
We could say dozens, if not hundreds of times.
That they could finish the sentence and, one time my wife was asked, "Is he that funny at home?" And she said, "No, there's not a crowd there." I'm like, "Come on, babe.
But you are. I've been around the table with you. You can cut loose. That's good."
Now, I know there are people who are listening who they need to laugh today. Ministry can be tough. It can be difficult. I also know that they might have a season that they're going through in their marriage where it's just that grind. And, we go through ups and downs in marriage. We all have. I've been married 38 and a half years, and there are different times and stretches that are great, and there are times that are difficult. And it's usually because we're not in sync together. What would you say to the couple, the ministry couple, the Christian leader who is in that season right now? How would you encourage them?
Yeah, so we know marital satisfaction, joy, humor, laughter, which is the overflow of joy. It's based on factors and skills that can work in any season or stage of life. And the reason I love saying that is because the seasons and stages of life change us. One of my friends in marriage ministry says over the course of your marriage, you're going to be married to 5 to 7 different people. That's how often the seasons and stages change us. We go, we have kids, that changes us. We
that's good.
Have, a job is going to change us. Retirement will change us. If our body begins to deal with, the grind of life, and we have physical ailments, that changes us. Amy and I are in a new season stage called empty nesting. So that changes us. So we have to look for, through curiosity and fascination, the new moments of joy. And here's what I tell that couple going through a serious season who are like, humor doesn't seem appropriate right now. We have all been to funerals where we're mourning and we're taking to heart the loss of a family member or friend. And throughout that funeral, there are moments of laughter. It's appropriate. It's good timing where a story is brought up. And it's when we pastor people through seasons of mourning, we always tell them, hey, 2 weeks from now, 4 weeks from now, 6 weeks from now, say his name, say her name, share a story. If you're driving down the road and remember something that was funny that they said or did, call his wife or call her husband and tell them that they want that.
Oh, that's great.
They want that. And so even during a season like mourning, we can have these little windows and we're not invalidating the season that we're going through. But you have to be intentional with it later on. You have to be intentional with non-sexual touching. You have to be intentional with giving each other compliments. You have to be intentional with quality time. Why aren't we intentional with laughter and humor and choosing it, and to say, we're looking for it today, we're going after it today? And again, it's not that it consumes our day, but I am constantly looking for it, knowing that I'm in the grind of ministry every day, dealing with the heaviness that sin brings into the lives of people. But is that, we've talked about Chuck Swindoll, just him, retiring lately at age 90.
Turned 90, yeah.
Just did his last sermon at Stonebriar Community Church in Frisco, Texas. And, he almost didn't go into ministry because of his sense of humor, because he thought he'd have to be this, frown-faced clergyman. He says in his book, Laugh Again, and I just have to be serious all the time. And he goes, I was a guy who loved life and had joy and laughed a lot. And I thought to become a pastor or preacher, I was going to have to put all that away. I went to Dallas Seminary when he was the president, and it was like this, it was almost like he gave me a permission slip to, no matter what you go through in life and in ministry, it's okay to laugh. You're not breaking any code by enjoying life with your wife and kids, and even in ministry.
My wife always says, she's going to put on my tombstone, it was just a busy season. Because she's heard that so many different times. I think it's Brady Boyd, Pastor Brady Boyd in Colorado, that says it this way. He says, if you say it's just a busy season, and if you say that more than once, it might just be a habit.
Yeah.
And boy, that really convicted me. Let's shift over and talk a little bit about humor within the church and within ministry. You alluded a little bit to Chuck Swindoll and how he loved to use humor. Dwight L. Moody was the same way.
Yeah.
He loved to use humor, and he would say when people would get on him that he had offended someone, he said, if you only knew how much I have held back. He said,
I know.
What was it? You would commend me on my restraint?
Yeah.
Is that the line?
I forgot that. It's a good one.
Yeah. But humor sets up, there's so many things that you can do with it in preaching. And I've heard you do it countless times in your preaching, where a person, when they laugh, it opens the door, they open their heart, and now you can move in for the kill.
Yeah.
Tell us some of the thoughts that run through your mind when you think about how you use humor in preaching and how you're intentional about it.
Yeah, and I've heard some sage pastors over the years warn young preacher boys on humor. And the warning is warranted. I get it. That we have to know what's appropriate, because I've seen it go bad.
Sure, we all have.
We've all done it. We're like, man, that one I just thought of in the pulpit, and I decided I'd deliver it. There are times I pause while preaching, thinking, I'm going to say this, but then I know it's Holy Spirit, and it's the filter. I'm going, okay, no, do not say that. That one, Amy needs to hear that one first. But again, just like in life, ministry, marriage, in preaching, I felt the freedom from Chuck Swindoll in my days at Dallas, just watching him preach and just coming to a real tense moment in a message, and then sharing something from his life, real life. And now my wife warns me all the time, and this is good warning, and I, of all people, have to be very careful of this. She says, there are moments our congregation is sitting in what you just shared, and they need to. I can sense it in the room. It's quiet. Heads are nodding. Everyone's wrestling with the conviction that was just shared. And my pastor heart jumps ahead of my preaching, teaching heart, and I want to rescue people. Like, I want to save them from that moment. And so I'll relieve the tension too soon. Amy, for 20 plus years, we've been married 28 years, but for 20 plus years, she'll say, you bailed him out today at that one point. And they needed to wrestle with that a little bit more. And so that's what we talk about, timing, and why it's so important that you, when the Holy Spirit is working through your message, there are times he can work through the humor too. Some of the warnings that I have is, don't bail out too soon. In stories, especially from your marriage and family, make your wife the hero.
Yes.
Okay? Make your children the hero, not you. And so if something happened in your family this week that you all were a part of, if you are going to lean toward any sort of joke, it's got to be self-deprecating. It's got to be you poking at yourself. Because when we say we want someone with a sense of humor, we're not saying we want someone who can tell us jokes. Because this is my wife. My wife will say, I'm about to tell you a joke. That's how she sets up her jokes. Because she doesn't try them very often. She doesn't feel effective in joke telling. But that is not what it means to have a sense of humor. It doesn't mean you're a joke teller. It means you have the ability to laugh at yourself and invite other people in. It's one of the greatest benefits of laughter is, humor makes us more relatable. And I just think sometimes pastors, will share a story and it's too serious and they never want to poke fun at themselves for fear of looking imperfect, for fear of I can't. And I'm just telling you, it's in those moments when you're afraid you're going to lose credibility that you actually gain all the more. Because they're like, this guy's able to share, and he honored his wife in the process, and it made
it's
he
winsome.
was the one. Yes, and
people
more
lean
of that.
in on that. I found that the self-deprecating humor, I guess you can OD on that. I guess some people might do that where they're constantly putting themselves down, but carefully placed, intentionally placed, thought of ahead of time, takes the edge off if there is something that might make you look better than you are. And I enjoy looking for those things because people then relate with you. I mean, think about when you look for a friend.
Yeah.
You want somebody who is loyal, but one of the top things they look for is that sense of humor.
Yeah. That's why people want to golf with me. I'm not the world's greatest golfer, but I'm going to have the most fun on that course.
That is true. That is true.
Yeah.
I think about something Ken Davis said. It really helped me years ago. He talked about staying in your lane of high-risk humor and low-risk humor. I like the high-risk humor. It's got a better payoff. I like the work that goes into that. But if you're not a high-risk humor person, if you're listening to this and you say, oh, that's not me, stay in the low-risk humor. Yeah. And you can camp out there and you can have a lot of fun and you can still soften people's hearts up and give them that break in your message. Yeah. The other thing I think it was Ken Davis said, every time you laugh, it's because of one of three things: surprise, truth, exaggeration. Sometimes it's two out of the three. So I try to find, every time I laugh, why was I laughing? What was it that Ted said that made me cackle over that? And it was truth. And it was, and sometimes it is that exaggeration piece as well. It might be a combination of things. Yeah. But when we realize why people laugh, it makes it easier for us then to write those things into our message. Because if you got something heavy coming, they need that laughter, don't they?
And the thing I love about preaching with humor, and when I go to larger churches to speak that have multi-site, I understand the difference. But I love to preach to the room. And I love to call people out. And the easiest way for a pastor to get started if he wants to just, engage the congregation with humor is to say, hey, raise your hand if. I love doing that because then you can...
Audience participation, get some involved.
Participate with them. And I've been to concerts with country music artists that, have 30, 40,000 people. And when he engages or she engages one person, it makes a big room feel small.
Yeah.
And I will find myself in the middle of a message often. Pat Kershaw, who just went to be with the Lord, she's a member of our church for 22 years. She sat on the second row of our first service every week. And every now and then I would watch her facial expression with something I said or something she didn't like. And I go, Pat, what was your problem with that? I mean, I'll stop and ask her, and she'll say something. I was doing it so often 10 years ago. People visiting our church would walk up to me if they're coming from Kentucky or Minnesota, and they'd be like, we'd like to meet Pat Kershaw, because she became so much a part of the service. And I just think you can tell stories, you can, deliver humor from the front. But let me tell you, if your congregation feels the freedom to join you in that, I love engaging people. And now sometimes it goes bad, which if you're quick-witted, you can turn that around pretty quick and move on, like Dave Ramsey does when he hits that button and ends a call. I mean, you can do that from the front.
We don't get that power as pastors.
We don't.
Able to...
But I encourage pastors all the time. Write what you're going to say. I'm working on something this week. before I get to Romans 13:6, which says, Paul says, this is why we pay our taxes. It's for those who give their full time to governing. So I'm going to start at the top, and I'm working with, hey, I want you to make some noise. These are things I'm grateful for our government. You don't hear that list a lot. What are some things you love about our government? Make some noise if you're grateful for the military. Well, our whole church is going to go crazy, screaming, yelling. How about our first responders, right? Get them going. Then I'm going to start moving. How about MoDOT? I mean, listen, they're clearing the roads and they're, keeping it paved. I mean, we're loving that. But I'm working it to where I know that the applause is going to diminish as I work toward, the health department.
It's going DMV,
then I can,
uh-huh.
I can call them on that and be like, hey, now wait a second. Those moments in the congregation are priceless when it comes to humor.
I had, and I'm sure you've experienced this, I'm sure everyone who's listening has experienced times, if they use humor, where people in the church have come to them and said, I can't believe that you use humor, that much humor in your sermon. Or I had a guy come to me one time and say, you show me one joke where Jesus told a joke in your Bible. And was all fired up about it.
Yeah. Did you show him a verse?
I did.
What was it?
I might
gotta get my notes on.
I might also add it was a King James Bible that he had. It was a big, heavy one. I'll give him this. It was well worn. So I'll give him credit for that. But I immediately, when he said that, I said, let me have your Bible. Turned to the Sermon on the Mount. And when Jesus said, why do you worry so much about the speck of dust in your neighbor's eye when you have a plank in your own?
2x4 sticking out of yours, yeah.
And, I tried to explain to him, he wasn't a very receptive audience, that the humor of the first century was all in hyperbole and exaggeration.
Yeah.
And the bigger the exaggeration, the bigger the laugh. And that's why, I think Jesus employed everything possible.
So my question is, you use exaggeration in your sermons over the years. Do your fact checkers come up to you? I get my fact checkers coming up to me all the time. Now, is that really what happened? Is that exactly how that took place?
I bet Amy gets that question a whole lot. Because that's what my Beth will hear people say, is that exactly how it happened? And her line will be, well, he may have embellished some of that. Or
that's his perspective.
Exactly. But the way I look at it, if it is outlandish enough, then people understand that's what humor is based upon.
Yeah.
So I might milk a story and make it seem more than it is, but I'm doing it in a way that everyone knows, oh, he's milking this, and it's much worse. It wasn't that bad. And so at least that's how I justify it. Yeah. Talk to me, Ted. I feel like I'm in confessional right now.
Well, what I have a sheet, and it's just 3 columns. And it's an Annie chart. And I'm convinced I know some of the comedians that use this, but it's used in schools for writing, but it's ANI, affirming, negative, and interesting. And so if you're wanting to write something in, like, I don't know, you're talking about cake or pie, or I think about Jim Gaffigan's Hot Pockets or whatever, you put that at the top and you think of 10 positive things about that as fast as you can. And I think that's the best way that you can write humor and laughter into any talk or message, is think of 10 positive things as fast as you can, 10 negative things as fast as you can, and then just 10 interesting things. And don't try to be funny. You're just making observations, and then at the end it gets your mind into the discipline of thinking about it. But that's why some of these comedians can take Hot Pockets and have 10, 15 layers of punchlines off of it.
And play off of it, call back all the way through, and then make that the last line of the whole thing.
Yeah.
Let's talk about that, because I encourage every pastor, whether you are a student pastor, whatever you do, you lead a Bible study, if you're the pastor of the church, listen to comedians. It helps so much with timing. Who's some of your favorites that you listen to?
At the top of his game right now is Nate Bargatze.
No question.
And he's clean. Your whole family can watch him. I am very frustrated that all of the, subscription channels and programs that we have, the comedy's terrible. It's absolutely terrible, and I can't watch it with my family. And we just saw Nate Bargatze. It's his new Netflix special coming out in December, but we saw him film that at the Footprint Center. We just happened to be in Phoenix when he filmed it. And I'm sitting there. I got my brother, my wife, my son-in-law and daughter. And in the first 5 minutes, he's a master communicator.
Oh, yeah.
And you can tell he's practice. His timing is perfect. His writing is spot on. And again, I don't know if there are any moments on stage where he just came up with something and delivered it. Like, it's so dialed in, which you don't want to be a press play speaker to where, boy, that was really rehearsed. And I like the comedy that comes across as not all that rehearsed. Jim Gaffigan's another one I followed over the years. In church world, I love Johnny W., John Branyan, Tim Hawkins. All of these guys bring it a little, closer to home. And I often think about taking my unchurched friends to one of their deals going, I don't know if they're going to get everything that happens tonight because they're poking a lot of fun at the church. But I do. I get so many takeaways, and you may watch a comedian get a premise, write your own punchline. The reason it's so good, it's like when we listen to other pastors preach. I don't want to take their sermon and preach it as my own, but they'll share a story that reminds me of my story. Yeah. The comedians do the exact same thing. I had a guy come up to me once and goes, not only do you watch Jim Gaffigan, you study Jim Gaffigan. Because I'll do if I'm getting fired up on something on stage and it gets out of hand, I'll pause and I'll find myself going into the Jim Gaffigan voice. I'll go, oh, he's an angry little preacher.
The falsetto. Oh, yes. Oh, my. Yeah. Oh. That's gold. That's gold right there. Thank you for sharing that because I'm intrigued by that. And one of the things that all those people that you said, and also Brian Regan, is excellent at, is the power of the pause.
Oh.
And when I work with young pastors who are just beginning to preach, that's one of the things I feel like they're scared to take a breath and to let something sit. You were talking about that a little bit earlier. And so I encourage pastors, let that pause sit out there, whether it's a serious part where you're letting it sit for that, or it's a humor part. Sometimes we're scared to death of what might happen. And so as a result of it, we step on that because we're scared, they're not going to laugh. And we got to have the guts to sit out there. Jerry Seinfeld once said that he would go, all of the bits that he would do on comedy stations were 5 minutes. If he was on Carson, Letterman, any of those things, he had 5 minutes.
Yeah.
That was it, 4 minutes, 30 seconds. So he would go to bars all along New York City, comedy clubs, and say, just give me 5 minutes, give me 5 minutes. He'd take his tape recorder with him. And then he'd do the same thing over and over again. And then he would listen to it back and he would write it all down and he would categorize and say, they laughed hard at this. That's not worth it. There's not a laugh line there. It's not even a setup line. I'll cut it down. And he would take his 5 minutes and he'd get it down to 4.5.
Oh, that's good.
And the beauty of that, someone might be listening right now, some pastor saying, well, that's great, but I don't get to use the same stuff over and over again. I'm preaching at my church week in and week out, and I need new material. Okay, then practice telling that story on Monday or Tuesday.
Yeah.
Tell it again. My predecessor, Bob Russell, he would tell a story on Monday morning in our leadership team meeting. He'd tell it again in all staff meeting. He'd tell it on Thursday with the preachers meeting. He would have told it 3 times publicly.
That's gold.
Before he ever told it in the service, in the sermon. So he knew where the points were. He knew what went and what didn't.
And so use your pastoring time to encourage people with it. And I love it.
To wrap up, I just would love to know how you would minister to anyone who's listening who is a pastor, a ministry leader, and they are saying, okay, I'm in this tough season. Maybe it's in ministry. We talked earlier about the tough seasons of marriage. What would you say to that pastor? And how would you encourage them with Scripture when it comes to humor and some of the things that we've talked about today?
So I work with a lot of pastors' marriages. And one of my favorite lines I share with pastors is from the Song of Songs, chapter 1, verse 4. And this, so I'm from Branson, Missouri, so this works in country music capital of the world. Every marriage is a duet in need of great backup singers. And what I discover with most of the pastors and leaders I work with is they don't have great backup singers. You may have a great backup singer in an elder or two or a deacon or two, but you need someone who is practicing what we read in the Song of Songs 1:4. So the Song of Songs is an 8-chapter book. It's the beautiful duet between Solomon and the Shulamite woman. But the daughters of Jerusalem are the backup singers. And the first time we read them is in chapter 1, verse 4. We rejoice and delight in you. We will praise your love more than wine. You need to find that couple friend that you laugh with, that you have fun with. When I challenged Amy and I with this, I just Jill and David Jones. They're our closest friends in life. We travel the world with them. We're all foodies, so we would enjoy eating out together. And we laughed. I mean, we had a great time, but then we came to a point probably 10 years ago where we're like, this needs to be intentional. And we need to, we're friends, but we want to ask specifically, will you be our backup singers? Will you walk through issues in life with us? And I think it's important. Sometimes pastors think, well, the whole congregation, they're our choir. You don't need a choir for your marriage. You need a backup singer. One or two couples that are rejoicing and delighting and praising your love. If you don't have that, I would stop everything and begin the search for that today, and find someone that you enjoy being with, and start with that couple. Because I'm always asking, who are the people in your life you need to turn down or mute, and who are the people you need to turn way up. And it's really sad for me, the number of pastors I hear that they don't feel safe turning anybody up. But you need to invite that couple into your life.
And if you're listening to Ted right now, and you're thinking, well, my wife relates to this person, or I relate to the guy, or vice versa, however it might be. I know it's tough to get that where the wife and the husband both feel that comfort level. But I'm telling you, it's a prayer battle.
Yeah.
And what I found in some ways I had to do was I did it with other pastors, and because they understood the pressures of ministry. And so some of my closest people that were those couples that you're talking about were actually ministry couples. And they might be in your area, they might be in your region, but I promise you that God will lead you to those. That was you had so many great things. Thanks so much for being with us today. You're awesome, Ted, and may God continue to bless your ministry.
Pastor, thank you for having me.
Well, I loved that. Thank you, Ted. That was awesome. What we like to do on each episode is we try to wrap up the things that we heard and share some takeaways. You might pick up an illustration that you can use for a Bible study group or for a lesson or a message. But the first thing that stood out to me, I loved when Ted talked about that ANI chart, the ANI, talking about making a quick list of things that are affirming, that are negative, and that are interesting. And just using that as a thought starter. Sometimes I get stuck in my sermon prep and I get that writer's block. And so this is something that I can't wait to try out. Another thing that I thought was really cool was when he talked about Amy saying, don't bail them out too early. In other words, there's times when we're talking and we have a hard time with that pause. And instead of letting them sit in that silence, we bail them out so that they don't feel awkward. Well, sometimes that is a healthy tension, and it's good for them too, because that's when the Holy Spirit's doing something and He's at work. I love that line. Every marriage is a duet in need of a great group of backup singers. And if you're not married, keep that in the back of your mind. If you are married, then be on the lookout if you don't already have a couple or two who you have that closeness with, who are confidants and encouragers to you. The main topic today was humor. And if we gain anything from the great parts that Ted shared from his own experience, I would hope it would be this: use humor to set things up. Extremes are bad in humor. I think it's bad when a person never uses humor. I think it's bad when a person overloads and ODs on humor. There's times for messages or lessons where you need more humor, and there's other times where it's sparing due to the nature of the topic. But try to keep it in check. Think of it like this. Let me share a story with you, and it might help to bring it home. Some of you may remember what happened back in the Olympics in 2004. It was quite rare in that competition because USA's Matt Emmons was one shot away from claiming the victory and winning the gold medal. He had a huge lead. It was the 50-meter three-position rifle event. He didn't even need a bullseye to win. His final shot merely needed to be close to a target. That was it. Now, normally the shot that he made would have received a score of 8.1, which would have been more than enough for him to easily win the gold medal. But in what was described as an extremely rare mistake in elite competition, Emmons fired at the wrong target. He shot at the one next to his in lane 2, and he fired at that target in lane 3. And his score was a good shot at the wrong target. But you know what the score is if you're shooting at the wrong target? It's 0. It's a goose egg. It's nada. It's zilch. It's nothing. And so there's a lesson for us. Emmons walked away with, instead of a gold medal, an 8th place finish. And so think of it this way. It doesn't matter how accurate you are if you are aiming at the wrong goal when you are putting together your message. That's kind of how I feel about humor and writing a lesson or a sermon. It's not to be the focus of our message. It's to be a vehicle that helps pave the way to soften hearts so that the gospel can fall on fertile soil instead of rocky ground. So remember what you're aiming at and what the ultimate goal is, and use that to your advantage. Well, a huge part of what we hope to accomplish with this podcast is to equip you both personally and professionally. And one way that we do that is through thefocusedpastor.org. And when you create a free Focused Pastor account, you gain exclusive access to free resources. Plus, we give you 50% off of everything in the Focused Pastor store. Now, to sign up, all you got to do is head over to thefocusedpastor.org or click the link below in the show notes. Well, thanks so much for joining us on this journey. Every Tuesday, we're going to be dropping a brand new conversation on Pastor to Pastor. And it's designed to encourage, inspire, and challenge you. And if you found this episode helpful, please pass it on to your friends. You can find us anywhere you listen to podcasts or on YouTube at the Focused Pastor channel. Leadership can be lonely. We call this Pastor to Pastor for a reason. It's to remind you you're not alone. So until next time, I'm Dave Stone. God bless.